What happens when destiny itself demands a reckoning? For Ilara Moonwhisper, life as an Omega meant living in the shadows, serving tables at pack gatherings, keeping her eyes down, enduring the whispers that followed her like ghosts. She was the lowest of the low in the Silvercrest pack, her wolf so dormant that some questioned if she even had one. Her parents, beta wolves of respectable standing, treated her like a shameful secret, a stain on their bloodline they couldn't quite scrub away. But when Alpha Dominic Ashford stood before her at the claiming ceremony, the moon goddess's blessing burning silver between them, everything changed. The mate bond snapped into place with the force of a lightning strike, and for one breathtaking moment, Ilara believed the impossible, that she mattered, that she was chosen, that her suffering had led to something beautiful. Then Dominic opened his mouth. I, Alpha Dominic Ashford, reject you, Ilara Moonwhisper, as my mate. And what happened next? No one was prepared for. The claiming ceremony had been the grandest event in Silvercrest's history. Hundreds of pack members filled the ceremonial grounds, their wolves pressing close to the surface as the full moon rose heavy and silver above the ancient stone circle. Ilara had been there only to serve, carrying trays of wine, refilling goblets, invisible as always. She remembered the weight of their stares when the moonlight touched her skin, and Dominic's head had snapped toward her across the crowd. The scent of forest and embers and ozone and steel had crashed over her senses, so overwhelming she dropped the tray she was carrying. Crystal shattered. Wine pooled like blood, and Dominic had crossed the distance between them in 3 long strides, his golden eyes wide with shock and something that looked almost like horror. No, he'd breathed, but the mate bond was already forming, silver threads weaving between their souls. Ilara felt it, the rightness, the completion, the sense of coming home to a place she'd never been. The pack had gone silent. Her parents had gone pale. Dominic's beta, a cruel woman named Sarah, with a scent of cinnamon and iron and blood, had stepped forward, her lip curling. Alpha, surely the moon goddess hasn't. She has, Dominic had said flatly, his handsome face twisted with disgust as he looked at Ilara. But I won't accept this insult. The formal rejection came moments later, spoken in front of everyone. Pack law demanded a public ceremony for mate bonds, and pack law would witness their destruction just as publicly. The pain had been immediate and catastrophic. When a mate bond formed, it wove itself through every part of your being, heart, soul, wolf. Severing it was like being torn apart from the inside. Ilara remembered screaming, remembered collapsing to the stone, as agony, unlike anything she'd ever known, ripped through her chest. It felt like her ribs were cracking open, her heart being carved out with a rusty blade. She'd smelled her own terror, lavender turning acrid, morning dew evaporating into nothing. "Remove her," Dominic had ordered, his voice cold. 2 guards grabbed her arms, hauling her to her feet even as she gasped for air that wouldn't come. Beyond our borders, the Omega is banished. Alpha, please. Ilara had managed, but Sarah had backhanded her across the face. Know your place, reject. They dragged her through the pack grounds as wolves watched from windows and doorways. Some looked away. Most didn't. They threw her into a transport, drove her to the northernmost border, where Silvercrest territory ended and the wildlands began, and dumped her in the snow. "Good luck, Omega," one guard had laughed. "Rogues hunt these woods, or the cold will get you first." The transport's taillights disappeared into the darkness. Ilara had tried to go home, tried to reach her parents' house, but they'd blocked the mind-link connection that bound pack members together. When she finally reached their door on foot, bleeding and hypothermic, Her mother had answered with tears in her eyes. "You can't come in," she'd whispered. "Mom, please. You were rejected by an alpha. You have no place here anymore." "You have no place anywhere." Her mother's voice broke. "I'm sorry, Ilara, but we can't help you. The pack laws." Her father appeared behind her mother, his face hard. "Go, before someone sees you here and thinks we're harboring a reject." The door closed, and Ilara was alone. The blizzard came fast, as winter storms did in the northern wildlands. Within an hour, Ilara couldn't see more than a few feet ahead. The wind screamed like a dying animal, and the cold was so intense it stopped hurting and just became a heavy numbness. She walked because stopping meant death. Her thin ceremony dress, the one she'd worn to serve at the event that destroyed her, offered no protection. Ice crusted in her hair. Her lips cracked and bled. The scent of pine and earth and distant wolf musk filled her nose. But her own wolf remained silent. She'd always been dormant, barely a whisper in Ilara's mind. Now, after the rejection's trauma, she was gone entirely. "I'm going to die out here," Ilara thought distantly. The panic had burned itself out hours ago. Now there was just acceptance, cold and final as the snow. She stumbled over a root hidden beneath the drifts and fell hard. Getting up seemed impossible. The ground was almost warm compared to the wind. "This is it," she thought. "This is how it ends." She thought of Dominic's disgusted face, Sarah's cruel smile, her parents closing the door. Maybe they're right. Maybe I was never supposed to exist. The darkness came softly, folding over her like a blanket. Warmth. That was Ilara's first thought as consciousness crept back. Not the terrible burning warmth of frostbite, but genuine heat. Soft and encompassing. She opened her eyes to firelight dancing across stone walls. A cave. She was in a cave, lying on a pile of furs that smelled like wild things. Aged oak and winter snow and pine and storm. And she wasn't alone. The wolves surrounded her in a perfect circle, their massive bodies creating a wall of protection against the cold. Ilara's breath caught as she counted them. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 10 wolves, each easily twice the size of any pack wolf she'd ever seen. Their fur ranged from midnight black to silver white to deep auburn, and their eyes glowed in the firelight with an intelligence that made her throat tight. "You're awake," a deep voice said. The largest wolf, a magnificent creature with fur the color of storm clouds and eyes like molten amber, rose to his feet. The shift was seamless, bones and muscle flowing like water until a man stood before her. He had to be well over 6 feet tall, his body a map of scars and hard-won strength. Gray threaded through his dark hair, and his face held the kind of authority that didn't need to be announced. "Don't be afraid," he said, though his voice carried the unmistakable weight of command. "We've been waiting for you." Ilara tried to speak, but her voice came out as a croak. The man, Alpha, her instincts screamed. This was an alpha of alphas, produced a water skin and helped her drink. "Who are you?" she finally managed. "I am Kirin Stormwalker, commander of the Unchained." He gestured to the other wolves, who watched her with the same intense focus. "And we are your guard, Matriarch." "I don't understand." "You will." Kirin's scarred hand touched her shoulder gently, and the scent of aged oak and winter snow wrapped around her like comfort itself. The rejection wasn't a curse, Ilara Moonwhisper. It was the key. Over the next 3 days, as the blizzard raged outside and Ilara recovered her strength, Kirin told her everything. The Unchained were not ordinary wolves. They were the last of an ancient bloodline, warriors bound by prophecy to serve the Matriarch, a queen of wolves whose power surpassed even the strongest Alpha. For centuries they'd searched, following the moon goddess's guidance through visions and dreams. The signs all pointed to you, Kirin explained as they sat by the fire. The other guards had shifted to human form, 9 men and 1 woman, all bearing the marks of experienced warriors. But your power was hidden, locked away. I don't have any power, Elara protested. I'm an Omega. I've always been. You were made an Omega. This came from the female guard, a fierce woman named Lyra, whose eyes burned like coals. Someone bound your wolf when you were an infant. Dark magic, old and specific. Ilara's blood ran cold. That's impossible, is it? Kirin's gaze was gentle but unyielding. Tell me, Ilara, did your parents ever explain why your wolf never emerged? Why you were so weak when you came from Beta bloodlines? She couldn't answer. The pieces were falling into place, sharp and cutting. They were afraid, another guard said. A scarred man named Darius, whose presence radiated barely controlled violence. The prophecy spoke of a queen who would come when she was needed most, who would rise from rejection and pain, who would be marked by the moon goddess herself. Your parents saw the signs, Kirin continued. Whatever gift you possess, it terrified them enough to bind it before you could even walk. They thought they were protecting you, or protecting themselves from what you might become. But the binding was tied to pack bonds, Lyra added, her voice sharp with satisfaction. When that Alpha rejected you, when he severed the mate bond so brutally, he shattered the spell holding your power down. A wave of dizziness washed over Ilara. I don't feel powerful. I feel broken. Because your wolf is waking up, Kirin said, and she's angry. As if in response to his words, something stirred deep inside Ilara's chest. A presence, vast and ancient, uncurling from a sleep that had lasted her entire life. Sister, a voice whispered in her mind. Finally. I can finally reach you, Ilara gasped, tears springing to her eyes. I can hear her. What's her name? Lyra asked softly. The voice in her mind hummed with power. I'm Aurora, and we are going to show them what they threw away. The prophecy itself was recorded in texts so old they crumbled at the touch. Kirin had a copy preserved in glass, the words written in silver ink that glowed under moonlight. When the bonds of kin and kind are broken, when rejection's pain has been the token, the matriarch will wake from dreamless sleep, her power vast, her judgment deep. She will be marked by moon and star, born of nothing. She'll reach far. She will come when darkness falls, when the old ways crumble and the tyrant calls. It's a nursery rhyme in some packs, Kirin said. A legend told to pups. Most don't believe it anymore. But we do, Darius growled. We've served the bloodline for generations, waiting for the queen to return. Ilara read the words again and again. I don't know how to be this. I don't know how to be anything but what I was. Then we teach you, Kirin said simply. He stood, offering her his hand. Starting with your transformation. Aurora wants out, Ilara. It's time to let her free. The terror was immediate. I've never shifted. Not once. What if I can't? You can. His confidence was absolute. Trust your wolf. Trust yourself. They took her outside as the storm cleared, the Unchained forming a protective circle around her in the moonlit snow. The cold didn't touch her anymore. Aurora's awakening had brought with it a warmth that burned just beneath her skin. Ready? Aurora asked. No, Ilara admitted. But let's do it anyway. The first shift was nothing like she'd been told. Pack wolves always described it as painful. Bones breaking and reforming, muscle tearing and rebuilding. But for Ilara, it felt like coming home. Her bones flowed like mercury, rearranging themselves with purpose rather than force. Fur erupted across her skin in a wave of silver and white that caught the moonlight and threw it back in cascading ripples. But it was the power that stole her breath. It built in her core like a star going nova. Heat and light and raw, untamed energy that poured through every vein, every nerve, every cell. She felt herself growing, expanding, her wolf form rising larger and larger until she towered over even Kieran's massive shifted form. When the transformation completed, Ilara looked down at paws that could crush stone. Her fur glowed with an ethereal silver light, and her eyes, she could see her reflection in the ice, burned with the pale blue of a winter sky split by moonlight. Aurora's joy was a living thing in her mind. Yes, this is us. This is who we truly are. Ilara threw back her head and howled. The sound shattered the night. It wasn't the howl of a wolf, but the cry of something primal and unstoppable. A queen announcing her presence to the world. The earth trembled. Ice cracked and fell from the trees in glittering sheets. In the distance, lesser wolves would be cringing in submission, their instincts screaming at them to bow. When silence fell, Kieran shifted back to human form, his amber eyes bright with awe. "Matriarch," he said, and his voice held reverence. He dropped to one knee in the snow. "We are yours to command." One by one. The Unchained followed, 10 ancient warriors kneeling before her. "Rise," Ilara said, her voice carrying Aurora's resonance. "You saved my life. You showed me the truth. I should be kneeling before you." "No," Lyra said firmly. "This is the natural order. You lead. We follow. That's how it's always been." Ilara shifted back, the transformation smooth as silk, and found herself standing in the moonlight with tears streaming down her face. "I don't know how to be a queen." "Then you'll learn," Kieran said, "and we'll teach you. That's what we're here for." The days turned to weeks, and the weeks built Ilara into something new. Kieran taught her to control her shifts, how to call Aurora forth partially, letting claws or fangs emerge without full transformation, how to use her enhanced senses to read the world around her with crystalline clarity. "Scent tells you everything," he explained one morning as they tracked a deer through the forest. "Not just what something is, but what it feels. Smell the air. What do you notice?" Ilara inhaled deeply. "The deer is frightened. I can smell the adrenaline." "Good. What else? There's another predator nearby. Fox, maybe?" "No." She concentrated. "Wolverine. And it's injured. I can smell infection." Kieran's approval warmed her like sunlight. "Your nose will never lie to you. Trust it." Lyra trained her in combat, not the brute force of pack wrestling, but strategy and speed. "You're larger than any opponent you'll face," Lyra said, circling Ilara in the training clearing. "But size means nothing if you're slow. Show me your reflexes." She lunged without warning, and Ilara's body moved on pure instinct. She sidestepped, caught Lyra's arm, and used the warrior's own momentum to flip her onto her back. Lyra grinned from the ground. There she is, the queen who doesn't need to be taught. She just needs to remember. But it was the discovery of her other abilities that truly changed everything. It happened during a training exercise when Darius took a bad fall and broke his leg. Ilara heard the crack, smelled the blood and pain, and something inside her surged forward. "Let me," she said, dropping to her knees beside him. Without thinking, she placed her hands over the injury. Power flowed from her core, down through her arms, and into Darius's broken bone. She felt it like water finding its course, seeking out the damage, wrapping around it, coaxing the bone to knit, the tissue to heal. Silver light pulsed beneath her palms, and within minutes, Darius was staring at his leg in shock. It's healed. Completely healed. You're a healer, Kieran breathed. Moon goddess above, you're a healer. It's more than that, said another guard, a quiet man named Theron who rarely spoke. Alpha Dominic commanded us to remove you, but I wanted to resist. I wanted to refuse. His eyes met hers. That was you, wasn't it? I felt your will pressing against mine even then. Alara remembered. In her pain and fear, she desperately wished for someone to help her, to stand up for her. Command, Lyra whispered. You can compel other wolves. The matriarch's gift, Kieran confirmed. Healing and command. You can knit wounds and bend wills, but only if you have the strength to wield it. Which you do. The found family grew stronger each day. They shared meals around the fire, told stories of ancient battles and lost loves, laughed at Darius's terrible jokes and Lyra's merciless teasing. They taught Alara to hunt, to fight, to lead. And slowly, she stopped thinking of herself as the broken Omega. She was becoming something else entirely. The scout found them on a crisp morning 6 weeks after Alara's awakening. She smelled him before she saw him, the familiar pack scent of Silvercrest mixing with fear and desperation. Aurora growled in her mind. Enemy. But when the young Beta stumbled into their clearing, he was alone and half-starved. He collapsed at the boundary, gasping. Please, he begged. I mean no harm. I bring a message. Kieran had his hand on his blade, but Alara stepped forward. What message? The scout's eyes widened as he took her in. They said you were dead. They were wrong. Her voice carried Aurora's weight. Speak. Alpha Dominic knows you live. He's mobilized a war party. 20 warriors, maybe more. They march on the Unchained's territory. The scout's voice shook. Beta Sara leads them. She wants your head. Of course she does, Alara thought. Sara had wanted Dominic as her mate for years, had been furious when the moon goddess chose someone else. When do they arrive? Kieran demanded. Tonight. They'll reach the valley by moonrise. The Unchained exchanged glances. Darius cracked his knuckles. Let them come. No, Alara said. The others turned to her, and she felt the weight of command settle over her shoulders like a mantle. This is my fight. They rejected me, banished me, left me to die. Silver light began to pulse beneath her skin. It's time they learned the cost of that choice. They came as the full moon rose, 23 wolves in battle formation with Dominic at the head and Sara at his right hand. Alara watched them from the rise above the valley, the Unchained arrayed behind her in perfect silence. She'd prepared for this. Dressed in leather armor that Lyra had modified to fit her hair braided back, her body humming with Aurora's power. The scent of lavender and morning dew and wildflowers had transformed into something sharper, stronger, the smell of ozone before a lightning strike. Dominic's forest and embers scent reached her even from a distance, but now it carried notes of anxiety. Regret. He'd been having second thoughts, she realized. Too late. Ilara Moonwhisper, Dominic's voice boomed across the valley. You are trespassing on claimed territory and consorting with rogues. Surrender, and I'll grant you a quick death. A wave of power washed over the assembled wolves, Ilara's presence undeniable and absolute. Several of Silvercrest's warriors whimpered. I'm not Ilara Moonwhisper anymore, she called back, her voice carrying Aurora's resonance. I'm Ilara Stormbringer, matriarch of the Unchained. And you, Dominic Ashford, are the one trespassing on my territory. Sara laughed, the sound brittle. The Omega thinks she's a queen. Alpha, let me handle this. She shifted mid-stride, her russet wolf form charging up the rise with lethal intent. The scent of cinnamon and iron and blood grew stronger as she closed the distance. Ilara didn't move, didn't even shift. When Sarah lunged for her throat, Ilara's hand shot out and caught the she-wolf by the scruff. Power pulsed, not to harm, but to compel. Sarah's body went rigid, her eyes wide with shock. "Shift," Ilara commanded. The transformation was involuntary, ripping through Sarah until she hung suspended in human form by Ilara's grip, her feet dangling above the ground. "You wanted me dead," Ilara said softly. "You would have killed me yourself that night if Dominic had let you. Because you were jealous. Because you wanted what the moon goddess gave to me." She dropped Sarah, who collapsed, gasping. "But I am not interested in what you wanted. I am interested in what you took." She turned to face the war party and let the transformation take her. This time, she controlled every moment. Her bones flowed into their new configuration with liquid grace. Her fur emerged in waves of silver light that lit the valley like a second moon. She rose to her full height, 9 feet at the shoulder, a mythic creature of power and fury and absolute authority. Her eyes blazed with pale blue fire. The first howl shook the earth. The second sent rocks tumbling down the mountainside. Behind her, the Unchained transformed. They weren't normal wolves. They'd never been normal wolves. These were the forms they'd hidden for centuries. Dire wolves from an age of legends, each one massive and scarred and utterly deadly. Kieran stood tallest among them, his storm-gray fur crackling with latent energy, easily matching Dominic's alpha form in size. But even he looked small next to Ilara. "Goddess save us," someone in the Silver Crest ranks whispered. Dominic stared up at her, his golden eyes filled with dawning horror. "What are you?" "Everything you threw away," Aurora's voice echoed across the mental link that connected all shifted wolves. "Everything you were too blind and too proud to see." Ilara descended the rise in measured steps, her massive paws leaving glowing prints in the snow. The Silvercrest warriors scrambled backward, their instincts screaming at them to submit, to flee, to do anything except challenge the apex predator before them. "Attack!" Sarah shrieked, but no one moved. "I said attack!" One warrior, braver or more foolish than the rest, charged. Ilara moved with speed that belied her size, sidestepping his lunge and catching him with a paw to the chest that sent him tumbling harmlessly into a snowbank. Not hurt, not killed, simply removed. "Stand down," Dominic said quietly. His alpha voice carried command, but it was nothing compared to the weight of Ilara's presence. "All of you, stand down." The warriors obeyed, lowering their heads, tails tucking. Dominic shifted to human form and dropped to his knees. "Mercy," he said, his voice breaking. "I was a fool. I rejected the moon goddess's gift because I was too weak to see its value. I condemned you to death because I cared more about my pride than my purpose." He bowed his head. "I deserve whatever judgment you pass." Ilara shifted back, standing before him in her armor, her silver hair loose around her shoulders. The scent of his regret was genuine, bitter and sharp and thick with self-loathing. "You made a mistake," she said quietly. "You didn't just reject me. You rejected your destiny. You rejected the moon goddess's will. And you sent me to die in the cold because you couldn't see past your own ambition. I know, but your rejection freed me." She placed a hand on his bowed head, and silver light pulsed from her palm. "It broke the spell that bound my power. It gave me the path to become who I was always meant to be." She stepped back, and her voice rang with command. "Dominic Ashford, I strip you of your alpha title. You will serve as a warrior in your pack. No more, no less. Learn humility. Learn to see value in those you once dismissed. She turned to Sarah, who had gone pale. And you, Beta Sarah, you let jealousy corrupt you. You struck a defenseless woman and laughed at her pain. You are banished from Silvercrest. You will live as a rogue until you can prove you've learned compassion. If you survive that lesson, you may petition for a new pack. Sarah's face twisted with rage, but Ilara's power pressed down on her like a physical weight, and she could only nod. The rest of you, Ilara addressed the cowering warriors, return to your pack. Tell them that Matriarch Stormbringer has claimed the northern territories. These are my lands now. Any who wish to live here in peace are welcome. Any who come seeking violence will face the Unchained. She felt the ancient words rising in her throat, powered by Aurora's instinct and generations of ritual. I am Matriarch Ilara Stormbringer. I am chosen of the Moon Goddess. I am guardian of the lost and defender of the weak. Her eyes swept across them all, and several wolves lowered themselves flat to the ground. This is my territory. You will respect it, or you will face consequences you cannot imagine. Thunder rolled across the clear sky, and moonlight brightened until the entire valley glowed silver. The Moon Goddess herself had acknowledged the claim. The Silvercrest wolves fled into the night, carrying their disgraced alpha and banished beta with them. The Unchained watched until the last scent faded. Then Kirin approached Ilara where she stood at the valley's edge. You showed mercy, he observed. I showed justice. She turned to him and found him watching her with an expression that made her heart skip. Mercy would have been forgiveness. They haven't earned that yet, but they earned a chance to earn it. You are going to be an extraordinary queen. The words hung between them, heavy with meaning. Over the weeks, Ilara had felt the mate bond reforming, not the forced mystical connection the Moon Goddess had created with Dominic, but something chosen and true. The scent of aged oak and winter snow had become home. Kirin's steadfast presence had become the foundation she built herself upon. The mate bond with Dominic is broken, she said softly. Severed completely when he rejected me. I know. The Moon Goddess doesn't choose again. Once rejected, the bond is gone forever. I know that too. But she does allow new bonds, chosen ones. Bonds formed not by fate, but by will and love and trust. Kirin's hand found hers, calloused and strong and gentle. Are you asking me something, Matriarch? I'm asking if you'll stay beside me, not as a guard, though I treasure that. Not as a commander, though I need that too. She met his amber eyes. As my mate, my chosen, my equal partner in all things. The smile that crossed his scarred face was like sunrise. I have been yours since the moment we found you in the snow, and I will be yours until the last star falls from the sky. The mate bond snapped into place, not silver this time, but gold and warm and right. Ilara felt it settle into her soul like a key finding its lock, and this time there was no pain, only completion. Kirin pulled her close and kissed her as the Unchained howled their approval to the moon. 3 months later, the Northern Territories had been transformed. The old cave system that served as the Unchained's base became the heart of a new settlement. Wolves from broken packs, rejected wolves, rogues seeking redemption. They came in ones and twos at first, then in families and groups. Ilara welcomed them all, healed their wounds, and gave them a place to belong. The Matriarch's territory became known as a sanctuary, a place where the old hierarchies meant nothing, where Omegas could find their power and Alphas could learn humility. Ilara's parents came on a gray morning in early spring. They stood at the border, their faces aged with guilt and grief, and Ilara felt Aurora's rage at the sight of them. They bound us, her wolf snarled. They stole our childhood. They were afraid, Ilara responded, and fear makes people do terrible things. She met them at the boundary. They fell to their knees. "We're sorry," her mother sobbed. "We're so sorry. We thought we were protecting you. The prophecy terrified us. We didn't want you to be hunted, to be used as a weapon. So we hired a witch to bind your wolf until you were old enough to understand." But the binding took root, her father continued, his voice hollow. It became permanent. And by the time we realized what we'd done, we were too ashamed to tell you. We watched you suffer, watched you be treated as worthless, and we did nothing because we'd caused it. The scent of their guilt was overwhelming. Lavender turned to ash. Ilara closed her eyes, feeling the weight of their confession. Aurora wanted vengeance. The matriarch's power could have crushed them, could have made them suffer as she had suffered. But she'd learned that vengeance was empty. "I forgive you," she said quietly. "Not because what you did was acceptable, not because the pain you caused doesn't matter, but because holding on to that hate would poison me more than it would hurt you." Her mother looked up, tears streaming. "You're so much stronger than we ever were." "Yes," Ilara agreed. "I am. And part of that strength came from suffering you caused, but I choose not to let that suffering define me." She took a breath. "You can stay. Work in the settlement. Help build what I'm creating here. Prove through your actions that you've learned. But you don't get to be my parents again. Not yet. Maybe not ever. That's a privilege you have to earn." They accepted the terms with bowed heads. Kieran found her afterward, wrapping his arms around her as she stared out at the growing settlement. "You were merciful again." "I was just," she corrected. "There's a difference. I love you," he said against her hair. And the mate bond sang with the truth of it. "I love you too." That night, as they lay together under the stars, Ilara felt a disturbance in the air, a pressure building, like a storm about to break. She sat up, her senses stretching out. "What is it?" Kieran asked, instantly alert. "Something's coming," she whispered. The moon goddess's presence pressed at the edges of her mind, urgent and warning. Something old. The prophecy spoke of it. When darkness falls, when the old ways crumble, and the tyrant calls. In the distance, beyond the mountains, something howled. It was not the howl of a wolf, but of something ancient and hungry, and it made the blood freeze in her veins. The blood moon would rise in 2 weeks, and with it, the true test of the matriarch would begin. But for tonight, Ilara Stormbringer stood with her mate and her guard and her people, and she was not afraid. She had been broken and remade. She had been rejected and reborn. She had walked through death itself and emerged as something the world had forgotten could exist. Whatever came next, she would face it. And she would not face it alone. And so Ilara's journey from powerless Omega to legendary matriarch came full circle. From the lowest of the low to a queen who commanded the respect of even the mightiest alphas. She learned that rejection wasn't the end of her story, but the beginning of her true self. That the bonds we choose are stronger than the ones fate forces upon us. That mercy and justice can walk hand in hand, and that sometimes the greatest power is found in the places we're taught to believe we're worthless. Her transformation showed that who we are isn't determined by how others see us, but by how we see ourselves. That true strength comes not from dominance, but from healing, compassion, and the courage to rebuild after being destroyed. What do you think about Alara's journey? Would you have shown the same mercy to those who betrayed her? What would you do with the power of the matriarch? Let me know in the comments below. I love hearing your thoughts. If you enjoyed this story, please hit that like button and share it with friends who love werewolf romances and stories of transformation and redemption. Don't forget to subscribe and ring that notification bell so you never miss when we post a new chapter. Because this is just the beginning. The blood moon is rising, and ancient evils are stirring in the darkness. The matriarch will face her greatest challenge yet, but that's a story for next time. Thank you for listening. We'll see you in the next chapter.